And welcome back to Sound Off. This is Jaime Umphenour in the KPRL Sound Off studios. And we are happy to have back on the show Mark Mix, and he is the president of the National Right to Work Committee, and he also serves as the president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Fund. So welcome back, Mark. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jamie. Thanks for the opportunity to chat again.
Well,
appreciate it.
Thank you. We have some hot topics to talk about, but before we get into it, can you share with us what the National Right to Work Committee is?
Yeah, Jamie, it's real simple. We've been around since 1955. We have about 2.8 million members that believe that every worker must have the right to join a union, but no one should be forced or lose their job if they choose not to join or support a labor union. It really is that simple. 27 states across America have passed right-to-work laws. Unfortunately, California is not one of them, but we're making progress on providing and restoring liberty to the American worker. That's our mission, and that's what we do every day.
And so in some states, did they force you to be a part of a union if there's a union? Is that what?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. In 23 states, you can lose your job if you don't financially support a labor union. They can't force you to join anymore. They used to be able to force you to actually join a private organization in order to work, i.e. a labor union. But the Supreme Court looked at that back in 1963 and said, you know, that's probably a power that we shouldn't be granting any private organization, is requiring someone to formally join them as a condition of working. But they did say that you could still be forced to pay up to 100% of union dues in order to keep your job. And so that's the federal law of the land, actually. The federal government imposes that on all the states. The states that have passed right-to-work laws have basically used a privilege granted by the federal government. And I use that word kind of pejoratively because, you know, you think the federal government would be protectors of liberty as opposed to opposers of it. But indeed, in the 1930s, they passed federal law that said you could be forced to pay dues to a union to get or keep a job. And we oppose all that, of course.
And how does the Janus decision that came down from the Supreme Court play into this? Because isn't that supposed to protect the worker?
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. And that was a huge victory. We argued that case. The National Right to Work Foundation took up the case of Mark Janus and argued it all the way through the federal court system and all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And on June 27, 2018, the United States Supreme Court, with Justice Sam Alito writing the decision, said that workers who work for government were going to be protected by, get this, Jamie, hold on, they were going to be protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. They were going to have constitutional rights not to pay a private organization for the privilege of working. So every government employee in California, all the way to Maine, all the way from Florida to Alaska, no government employee anywhere in America can be forced to pay union dues or fees in order to work for government. And that's at the lowest level of government to the highest level of government. There can be no compulsion, no compulsory union dues or fees if you're going to work for government. If you choose to pay, you can do that, but you can't be compelled and you can't lose your job.
Now, I believe here in California, of course, they're trying to find a workaround, I'm sure, to that.
Of course. And we've got cases all over the place where union officials have convinced their friends, particularly if they've got lots of friends in Sacramento, there's no question about that. But they try to work around it. They basically put restrictions on it saying, Jamie, if you can find a way to tell us that you don't support the union and you want to get out, if you can do that between two blue moons and come to the union headquarters with your driver's license, Social Security card, and be there at midnight or 12:01 a.m. on 10 days before your contract expires, you can get out. But what the Supreme Court said was very interesting. Not only did they say you couldn't lose your job, but what they did say, and this is just as important, and we won this kind of a provision of this in a California case we litigated back in 2012 that also went to the U.S. Supreme Court that we won, a case called Knox versus SEIU, that basically said unions had to get affirmative consent before they could take money from anyone. It used to be, the standard was you had to opt out. So you had to find a way out. Now, under the Janus decision, not only can you not lose your job if you don't pay fees, but the union has to get your permission before they can take money from you.
Okay, I think that is so important because these unions are not doing what the original intention of a union was. You know, safe working conditions, not having child labor, not working 30 hours a day, stuff like that. We've gone far beyond this now.
Yeah, absolutely. And because union officials decided that they wanted to get additional power from government, they became wards of government. They have to lobby. They have to play in politics because their power is a derivative of government action now. Instead of going out and convincing Jamie or Mark to join the union because they can provide great services and great benefits, and they can do all these wonderful things that will help you in your career or your occupation, they basically want to go to government, whether it be Sacramento, whether it be Washington, D.C., and say, look, we need more power to force more workers to join unions and pay dues. We want to force union officials and workers to be part of our organization as opposed to sell them a product. And that business model can't work, it won't work, and ultimately we'll strike it down, not only as we've done for the public sector, we'll do it for the private sector as well.
So let's talk about forcing people to do things, because the White House has announced that they are going to force companies and unions and government workers to get vaccinated against their will, with very few exceptions, of course. And my first assumption would be that the union would step in and be like, no, wait a minute, government, that is an overreach. You can't tell somebody how to treat their body medically. That has nothing to do with their job. But it appears from my reading that the unions were basically colluding with the White House to help craft this.
Yeah, indeed. The teachers union was doing that. Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, which is an AFL-CIO affiliate, was intimately involved, apparently, on helping not only the White House, but the CDC draft the regulations and requirements for reopening schools and other things that the government wanted to do. You know, the idea of mandates is something that the union officials basically have the privilege of doing right now. They can mandate that you associate with them in a unionized workplace. They can mandate in the 23 states that don't have right to work laws that you lose your job if you don't pay union dues or fees. But the idea of mandating, you know, the idea of taking something into your body raises the level, I think, significantly. I mean, not that the liberty impingement of forced unionization and forced association isn't a problem. It is. But, you know, you have some unions that have said, no, absolutely not, will we agree to mandates and we'll fight you. We have some unions that say, absolutely, yes, this is great and you should do it. And then you have some unions, like the American Federation of Government Employees here in Washington, that say, well, we might allow mandates, but we've got to negotiate that, meaning we're going to need to get something from it, meaning that the union officials are likely to get something from it before they agree to it. If they get something, then they'll say, okay, yes, everybody must be mandated, and we'll enforce that. And we'll allow the government or an employer to impose that on us as long as we get something out of it. So it's really kind of a mixed bag where the unions stand on it. On one hand, you've got the Randy Weingarten telling, you know, the government how to do it. On the other hand, you've got unions saying we must negotiate over it. And then you have firefighters unions and police unions who are actually standing up and saying we will not do it. Yeah. So it's an interesting mixed bag in that case. Yes,
I know a lot of firefighters and police officers who are like, nope, no way, not going to do this. And it's good, at least in some segments, different unions, that they are saying they're pushing back against this, because so many people are saying, first of all, is this constitutional? And second of all, this is such a huge overstep of government into just about every part of your life now.
Yeah. You know, the ideas of liberty and the ideas of right to life and property and all those things, they become relevant questions when you have a government that oversteps the enumerated boundaries of the documents that are designed to direct the operation of a federal government. I mean, I know that sounds so naive and so Pollyannish in the sense that we have, you know, greatly expanded on the powers of the federal government to the detriment of the state's power that was inherent in the founding documents of our country. But the idea of liberty, I mean, the notion that they can tell you that you must inject something into your body, I mean, I don't know. This is where the hypocrisy meter just peaks. You have a regressive leftist philosophy that says, you know, my body, my choice, and then they turn around and say your body, no choice. I don't know if I quite understand that, but it makes for interesting debate and interesting topics of conversation, but it also makes important discussions and debates about liberty, for sure, Jamie.
Yeah, and something that you know, the government was set up to protect our liberty and to protect our different rights that were given to us through the Constitution and through our divine creator. And so, I mean, we're losing that.
Yeah, the certain inalienable rights that we possess that are not of government's creation, and the right to property is something in life. Liberty and property, the property of one's labor is a relevant question when it comes to this notion that a private organization can compel somebody to not only associate with them, but in the 23 states that don't have a right to work, pay them in order to exercise their right to property, i.e. their labor, is really something that we think, should not be part of any type of government coercive power that is enumerated anywhere in the Constitution. I mean, in order to have the right to associate, it presupposes logically the right not to associate. These are fairly simple discussions in my view, but obviously government's grown so big, the federal government and the state government for that matter have grown so big that those discussions, seem almost impossible to make now.
Yes, and it's interesting who was not required to be part of the mandates, too. UPS and USPS don't have to to fall under that. And so that sends off that signal like, okay, so they negotiated something different with the White House to not be part of this mandate, which is odd.
Yeah, indeed it is. And so the union officials are saying, we'll get our little sweetheart deal. But what does this say to the confidence that if the government really believes that this keeps us safe, what does it say to the American people who have some questions about whether or not it's safe when they say, okay, these people don't have to get it, or Gavin Newsom can go and eat dinner at the French Laundry, or the Congress people are exempt from the vaccine mandates.
True,
and their staff on Capitol Hill.
Yep.
What does that tell the quote unquote the ordinary people of America about? Is he really trying to give us confidence about the vaccine when they do those types of things?
We're going to go to break. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Cindy Mims, owner and broker of Colony Mortgage. Thank you for voting us the best mortgage company in North County. Rates are still amazingly low. Please call Colony Mortgage with any of your purchase or refinance needs. With the values of homes going up, we can possibly eliminate your mortgage insurance or get cash out. And for investment properties, this is also a great time to lower your rate. Not only do we have hometown service, but we also have very competitive rates. We have years of experience with creative financing to find the perfect loan for you, whether it be conventional, FHA, VA, or USDA. We will find the right loan for you. Don't let credit issues stop you. We can help. Support your local businesses and come visit us at Colony Mortgage, 5365 El Camino Real in Atascadero, or call 805-466-3598.
And welcome back to Sound Off. This is Jaime Umphenour in the KPRL Sound Off studios, and we are chatting with the president of the National Right to Work Committee. And he's also the president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Fund, Mark Mix. And Mark, let me ask you about that infrastructure bill. And I think we've talked about it a few months ago. All of this is still being debated in Congress, and what. The first question is really what is infrastructure now? Because the bill is very little of real infrastructure. But there's a lot of union boondoggling in that bill as well. Do you see this getting passed, or are they just going to rip it apart in Congress?
Well, look, you're right. This is a 1,200-page bill or 2,700-page bill that started out as a $1.2 trillion so-called infrastructure bill, when the fact is that if you talk to most people and read about what people find in the bill that actually have read the bill, that, somewhere between 20 and 30% would be infrastructure as you and I recognize it, the idea of roads and bridges and ports and railroads and things like that. They've turned healthcare into infrastructure. They've turned community colleges into infrastructure. They've turned internet broadband into infrastructure. And I guess people could make the argument that some of that stuff is, but the bottom line is it's larded up with political favors, and the union officials are probably at the head of the table and enjoying the first servings of the main dishes of what is going to be dramatically increased government spending when it comes to this issue. Whether it gets through or not, I mean, they're kind of tied up right now in a Gordian knot. You have a group of so-called moderates. We have a group of members of Congress who say we're not going to vote for the infrastructure bill until the so-called reconciliation bill, which is another $3.5 trillion government spending spree that is going to be estimated around 5,000 pages of legislation. Until that thing moves properly, and they get all that done. And that includes lots of special privileges for organized labor. But the infrastructure bill, first and foremost, I mean, most of the money is set aside for unionized contractors only. In order to participate in an infrastructure bill that would have federal dollars in it, you have to have a union contract. And only about 14% of construction workers in America across the nation are labor under union contracts. I mean, 86% of construction workers in America are non-union, and that means that these construction firms that don't have a union contract probably can't get involved in the bidding process. And we do know this, that when you say union-only construction and you apply the so-called Davis-Bacon union prevailing wage to federal contracts and construction projects, the price goes up by anywhere from 10 to 30%, and that hurts the very taxpayers that these members of Congress say that they're looking out for all the time, and somehow we should begin to doubt that, Jamie.
Yes, I think if people haven't seen in the last several months, there's a lot to doubt. And we know that the president and his White House is very much in cahoots with unions. Like he is a union pusher, if I have ever heard one.
Yeah, he admits that. But what he really means when he says I'm the best union president that unions have ever had, what he means is he's the best president that union officials have ever had. Because it's not about rank and file workers. There's nothing in the PRO Act, which is this big smorgasbord of big labor privileges that is being debated. It's already passed the House with no testimony and no hearings and just said, yeah, we're going to pass this over. What he means is he's going to give union officials dramatically renewed power over rank and file workers. I mean, how can the guy be the most union president when the first thing he does is put literally thousands of union workers out of work when he banned the Keystone Pipeline? And he stopped construction of that. That was a project labor agreement where only union workers could work on it, but yet they're all on the unemployment line now because of Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's, I think Americans have very short-term memory, and that happened the first day he was in office, that he just closing down the pipeline. And that not only was that a great job producer, but what it did for surrounding communities where the pipeline was going in and bringing those dollars into the communities.
Yeah, and what it did for energy prices. I mean, somehow we can't build a pipeline in the United States. Union members can't build a pipeline in the United States, but he can approve the finishing up of Nord Stream 2 pipeline from Russia to Europe that gives them energy, power over us. And now we've got to go back to the Saudi Arabians and say, can you please increase your production because we're not producing anything or refining anything here in the United States anymore. I mean, it's such a backwards philosophy. You almost think it's on purpose, Jamie. There's no other way to describe what he's up to.
Oh, I think it's on purpose. I think there's definitely a bigger agenda happening, I think, than what most people would realize, because it's been so fast at the expense of our pocketbooks, but also our liberty.
Yeah, absolutely. I was out on the West Coast, 2 weeks ago, and my mouth fell open when I saw $5.19 for a gallon of gasoline. $5.19, really? Or 20 cents or whatever it was. I forget, but I knew there was a 5 to start it. I know that for sure.
Yeah. Now I drive a truck and $100 doesn't touch it to fill it up, but the pump turns off.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. The pump turns off at $100. So, yeah. And then that, it cramps your lifestyle. You have to really think about your driving habits and think, but they're wanting to push electric cars, but we don't have the electrical infrastructure, which is not part of the plan, to be able to have all these electric cars and electric everything.
Well, it's nice that you brought that up, Jamie. Whether you are transitioning on purpose or not, one of the parts of the so-called reconciliation bill will be a special subsidy for electric vehicles that are, guess what, made by union UAW represented workers. I mean, if you buy a UAW made, union made electric vehicle, you get an additional, I think, $4,500 subsidy paid for by taxpayers, as opposed to buying just a regular electric vehicle. So even the electric vehicle rollout has a union privilege, a union power piece to it.
Of course it does. Well, our time is up today, Mark. Do you have a website that folks can go to learn more about the National Right to Work Committee?
Sure. They can go to nrtwc.org, nrtwc.org.
Easy enough. Thank you so much, Mark, for your time today. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate it.